I have had arguments with people who are like, why is there so much attention on Israel? And I'm like, well, I mean, I can tell you why I pay attention to it, because there's no other country I raised money to grow trees in as a kid.
Yeah.
Just to starters.
But
right?
for politics and for young people in particular, it's the fact that Israel is the top recipient of our military aid, for example, and the entire public is being gaslit every single day about the atrocities happening there.
And also, like, what other country is spending tens of millions of dollars each election cycle to go after progressive candidates? You know, like, what other countries like sort of lobby is doing that? There is, I don't know.
It's more discreet if there's anything.
It's significantly more discreet.
And I'm sorry, the scale of the atrocities that are committed by our government in like the span of a short, or at least with our money by the Israeli government with our sanctioning in this short period of time is unprecedented. That's why this attention is on Gaza.
And I would also add, like, we would never expect to see 21 Hamas fighters killed today. Like, does anybody even have an idea of how many Hamas fighters are die a day? Like, I'm not saying like this is a terrible concern of mine, but you can't look at the news today without seeing that headline about 21 Israeli soldiers killed in the biggest day of Israeli soldier death. And then it turns out that they were in a building in Gaza that they were planting explosives to do a controlled demolition, because they want to make sure that there's nothing standing for, certain number of distance. I don't know if it's a half a mile or a mile or 2 miles from the border with Israel. And they want to level all of the buildings there. And apparently there was fighting nearby. And Hamas had an RPG that blew up a tank, and that triggered the explosion in the building. And these Israeli soldiers were trapped inside from this, controlled demolition that it hadn't happened yet.
Well, they're claiming that it's that's what set it off, right? That it was the Hamas attack on the tank, essentially. But there were the explosives were set in the building, if I'm not mistaken, already, right?
Yeah,
that set the chain reaction. So, yeah. I mean, regardless of how it began, the Israeli military had set up demolition explosives in these two buildings that collapsed on top of 21 soldiers. And like, the New York Times headline is, the Israeli military says 21 soldiers were killed in a single explosion. When you read that, what does that sound like? Like, we're talking about, there's this push to frame this as a war, right? This is not a genocide. It's a war between two sovereign actors, is what the Israeli military is claiming. That, it's not true, but that is what that headline enables. Like, people just scroll past that. It's just like, wow, damn, it's really bloody over there. And then it's in the second or third paragraph, apparently involving explosives placed by Israel's military to level the buildings. And they're creating this buffer zone, apparently, which which Biden is reportedly saying you can't do that. They're doing it anyway, by the border with Gaza, so that Israelis can go back to their home safely.
Meanwhile, Israel proposed a 2-month fighting pause in Gaza for release of all hostages. Hamas very quickly rejected that deal. This comes on the heels of the Hamas proposal to release all the hostages if there is a cessation of the war and they get to remain in political power in Gaza. But the amazing thing about this proposal, this 2-month proposal, is so obvious, is that this is Netanyahu trying to drag out this process as long as he can. Yeah. It was reported in Haaretz over the weekend, I think it was, maybe it was at the beginning of the end of last week, that Netanyahu doesn't want the release of the hostages because when the hostages get released, the impetus for the war may begin to die down in Israel. And in that instance, the Israelis are going to turn their ire towards Netanyahu, and he knows that if he's out of office, he may go to jail. Now, with that said, I don't think that there's any other Israeli leader that would be less interested in continuing an attack in Gaza. But we're already starting to see major sort of like former Israeli officials say, we got to wrap this up because this isn't having the effect that it was supposed to. Here is footage of members of Israeli, the families of Israeli hostages, busting into an Israeli Knesset meeting. We don't have any type of like we have some translations here, but they busted in and protested they're not doing enough to get the hostages released.
Well, they don't want to also reveal, like, there's a good chance Israel's killed many hostages through its indiscriminate bombing campaign too, and this is also after Netanyahu survived a vote of no confidence. It was not close. It only got 18 votes against him, but it got to the floor of the Knesset still, just to add to what Sam is saying about how domestic pressures are ramping up.
There won't be a deal on the back of whom? Will there not be a deal? What right does he have not to negotiate a deal? What right does he have, I ask you? If these were your children, what would you have done? I want to assure everyone this is a protester, that I will not let this go. And I will pursue you all until you cooperate with us, because we need to bring them all back. Now. Now. They just got into this room. Do we have the longer footage that I posted? Yeah. But we get a sense of what they're saying. But it was really pretty hectic in that room at first.
I mean, this has been the case since Blinken deleted that tweet on, what is it, October 8th or the 9th? And to be accused by supporters of the bombing campaign of not caring about the hostages in advocating for a ceasefire, when in fact, actually, it's the people that want to continue bombing that don't, has been one of the more maddening things.
Yep.
This is when they broke in.
תנו להם להגיד מה שהם רוצים. תעזוב אותו, תן לו להגיד מה שהוא רוצה.
They're basically overpowered.
I mean,
don't have
good.
much security.
תעזוב אותו. תעזוב אותו, תן לו להגיד מה שהוא רוצה. תעזוב אותה.
I mean, part of the problem I would imagine they have in terms of like security is they don't want to be on Israeli television, really, tussling these families.
Of course. I mean, meanwhile, in the West Bank, a Palestinian American 17-year-old was just shot dead.
By Israeli forces.
It was by apparently an off-duty cop, but basically, and a settler is my recollection. I'm like 90% sure of that, or at least what's being presented. So the point is just that, like, you kind of just see how it's righteous, of course, that these Israeli protesters are demanding the release of the hostages and an end to the bombing so hostages can get back. But on the other side of the wall, even in the West Bank, these executions of just random Palestinian people, including a Palestinian American, where like, where is the Biden administration in raising hell about this? But they didn't. The U.S. government didn't do crap when the Palestinian American journalist was executed as well, Shireen Abu Akleh. So there's a lot of double standards at play here, obviously.